Hello, my name's Geoff Filbey. I am a trainer and I work at Provek.
Hi, my name's Mark Ryan. I'm also a trainer at Provek as well.
And one thing we both have in common is we both recently took the new format of the PMQ exam, which was launched on the 2nd of September.
And passed as well, so we both passed.
Yeah, not a bad idea to throw that little tidbit in there as well. So what we wanted to do is just spend a little time to talk about the new exam and give you some little information on how to prepare for it, some tips and tricks, and give you a little bit of an overview on what to expect. And we've got some very, very good news for you in store in the next few minutes. So first kind of question is, well, why did we take the exam? Well, we wanted to take the exam as a fact-finding mission. Try to find out what it looks like, what it feels like, and get that information so that we can be more effective at training our students. Nothing like seeing something when you need to train it, actually seeing it firsthand. Was that your motivation as well?
Yeah,
Mark,
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, if we're going to train this to learners, then it's so valuable to have actually gone through the process ourselves and experienced it and know exactly what the kind of format of the exam is, and particularly being brand new, so that we can impart that onto our learners as well. Give them some really good advice and tips on how to prepare and what the experience is like from taking that exam as well.
Yeah, and there's nothing quite like the real life hands-on experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
The questions I had at the back of my head, well, the main one was, is there enough time to actually finish the exam? You might remember from the old version of the exam, that was the biggest killer, and that was the number one reason for failure, is you did have 3 hours and 15 minutes, but it never seemed to be enough time to complete the exam and do a quality job. So from your point of view, Mark, was there enough time to finish the exam?
Yeah, I definitely think they've achieved that. I think definitely in this new format, the exam, there's a lot more time to think about your answers and make sure you've chosen the right one. So I think this one, I think I didn't have to rush, and I think ample amount of time to be able to answer the questions. Was that your experience too?
Yeah, I had time left over, which I didn't on the first exam. I'm a fairly experienced test taker. With this exam, I did have time left over. You won't be rushed off your feet like you were with the last exam.
Yeah, I think it was a really good exam.
Yeah, I think that the timing is calibrated well. So that was the first question we had in our head when we took the new exam. Would there be enough time? And the good news that we have on the other side of actually taking it is, yes, there is enough time. Respect the clock, but you won't be rushed like you were for the previous exam. The other question that we had in our head going into the exam as part of our kind of fact-finding mission was, where do the questions come from? Every question that I had on the exam, I could link it back to a page within the Learner Study Pack. The Learner Study Pack on my exam was the one-stop shop. It was the single source of truth. I didn't need to be going into other avenues such as the Box 7 and things like that. Now that said, memorizing the book is not going to get you a pass mark because it is very much a practitioner's exam. The questions themselves will put you in scenarios and they'll ask, what would you do next? You have a stakeholder who is holding the funding. What's the power and interest of that stakeholder? In this case, that would be high power, high interest. How would you manage that stakeholder if they were to have a conflict with other members of the team, etc.? These are the kind of scenario situations that they'll put you in. So you have to be prepared for that. And the book isn't going to take you through every single scenario possible. But each question I had, I could link it to a knowledge area within this Learner Study Pack, which was of immense relief because it means we can study from one book. Our students can have a single source of truth.
You mentioned there about some of the questions. I really like the way on the new exam where lots of the questions were based around the scenario, which is really different to the old exam. So they would give you a scenario and say, in that particular scenario, what would you do? So there was lots of questions like that. Did you find the same?
I did, yes. I was often told, you are a project manager.
Yeah.
And you have a team which is in conflict. And then if you read the scenario, it starts to come to light that you're working in a matrix environment, which means there's a conflict between resources when it comes to the line manager versus the project manager.
Yeah.
And they would ask, what would you do next? And you could come up with answers such as careful planning with the line manager, ensuring rules, responsibilities are clear. There's a clear escalation point, these kind of things. But yes, the long answer questions that I had, and including some of the multiple choice as well, were very scenario-based. It wasn't one scenario consistently all the way across.
Yes.
The scenario changed from question to question. But the good answers to come up with, or the material in order to formulate a good answer, was about interpreting the scenario, putting yourselves in the shoes of a project manager who's in that situation, and answering accordingly. Very typical of what I would consider a practitioner's level test.
Yeah, I was the same thing. Lots of questions where it says, you're now the project manager of this particular company or this scenario. What would you do? And you would use a theory and some of the techniques that are in that study guide, and all the questions did link to the study guide, that you would recall that information and use that in your answers. So yeah, I think the study guide is fantastic, and I think it's a really digestible book as well. I'm not a huge reader. And sometimes when you see the huge kind of textbooks, I think, how am I going to read that? But I think it is something that I could literally sit down and read almost end to end.
Yeah.
Not in one go, obviously. But I think it's certainly an accessible study guide in support of the exam.
Yeah, I'm in full agreement with that as well. Another question we had in our head is, there's a 30-minute break. This was something that was added, quite revolutionary for APM to have this 30-minute break built into the exam. On the old exam, if you had taken a 30-minute break, you would have failed because the clock would have kept going. But on the new exam, exactly halfway through, there's 40 questions, 20 questions in, you're given the opportunity to take a 30-minute break.
That's an interesting point, because it's halfway through in terms of the questions, isn't it? But
yes.
Not necessarily the time. Can
Correct.
you explain about that as well, Geoff?
Yeah, so the time, you have 2.5 hours to complete 40 questions. So you have 2.5 hours to complete the entire exam. They've broken out the exam into 3 elements. So part A has 20 questions, and then part B will have 20 questions. And in between part A and part B will be a 30-minute break. And that break can be 30 minutes, it can be 5 minutes. It's really up to the person taking the test as to how they calibrate that and how they manage that. But it's inserted exactly 20 questions in of a 40-minute exam. One thing you do have to watch is if you go past halfway mark on the time. So if you go past an hour and 15 minutes for that first 20 questions, you are in fact behind.
And it does give you a warning as well.
Yeah,
there is a warning that comes up. So, technically, if you split the time, the 2.5 hours into 2 sections, it's an hour and a quarter for part 1, hour and a quarter for part 2. So if you're getting behind on that, so you're taking more time on that first part, then you do get a warning. So it lets you know calibrate where you should be in terms of the exam as well.
Once the break starts, the timer starts clicking down from 30 minutes, and you have up to 30 minutes. And a question we often get from our students is, well, what do I do during this break? Can I turn off my camera? Do I have to sit there and stare at the computer? And the answer is you can do whatever you want on the break.
You really can, yeah. I say to people, you can do anything you want to. You can go downstairs, make a coffee, use the facilities. You can go for a walk, even have a shower if you want to. You can do those kind of things. You can literally do whatever you want. You've got 30 minutes to, decompress from that first part of the exam, and then get yourself ready, and then take the second part of the exam. What did you do in your break, Geoff?
I went into my room, I decompressed for a little while. I think I did a quick meditation, not long, about 5 minutes, deep breaths, deep breathing.
You can do that too.
And got myself kind of mentally prepared for the second set of questions. I did also flip into the book as well.
You did?
Yeah, I did a little quick cramming between the 2 sections. Figured I'd had the time, I might as well use it.
Yeah.
But like Mark says, you can do whatever you wish with the break, whatever fits. You want to pet the cat, pet the cat.
Yeah.
Want to go run outside and run through the sprinkler if it's a nice day?
You can do that.
Have at it. The only thing you can't do is be late back from the 30-minute break, because the test will start without you, and then you'll find yourself obviously in a bit of a 2 and 8. So in essence, though, the answer to that question, does the 30-minute break work in practice? It works extremely well.
Yeah, I think it was. The break is really good, because I've never seen that on any of the exams I've done before.
No,
and to have a break in the middle, because one of the difficulties of some of the exams, it's really hard to sit there and concentrate and keep going full gas, isn't it, for like 2.5, 3 hours. So to have a 2.5 hour exam with a break in the middle, I think was really good. I've never had an exam like that before, and I really, really loved the break in the middle of it.
So one of APM's mission statements with the new exam is that it was more accessible, more inclusive, and I think mission accomplished on that, because of the break really does help with that element. So the last kind of question I had, maybe the most important question, was, well, how hard is this new exam? We all know the last exam was extremely difficult. Was this exam calibrated to that same level of difficulty? Did it all of a sudden become extremely easy? Or was it somewhere in between those two? And my assessment of that is the exam is difficult. Not as difficult as the previous version, but you do have to respect it. The questions can be quite tricky. They require quite a bit of thought. They require a bit of experience as well with practicing the questions. This isn't a kind of test that I would take cold on my own, just online, without any guidance, without any coaching, without any mentoring. I think a training provider is a prerequisite for taking the exam, getting some feedback on exam techniques, taking mock exams and things like that. You do have to be practiced because the questions themselves are looking for, like a lot of multiple choice questions, the best answer. So you may find on a multiple choice question that two of the answers look really good. They both align. But something in the scenario should lead you to the conclusion that there is a best answer there, even though many of them are good. There is one that is the best. So you have to respect this exam. It is difficult. They haven't suddenly made it easy. It is easier. It's a lot more manageable. But there is a pretty good level of difficulty in there. You have to respect it. You have to study. You have to put in the hours, is what I would say. Would you concur with that?
Yeah, completely agree. Yeah, it's not an easy exam. And I think, one piece of advice I would give as well is, particularly on those multiple choice, because they are quite tricky sometimes, you've got to read the question and make sure that what the question is actually asking you. And I recall a question on my exam that asked me about change management, and it was a multiple choice, and there was several options, and it said, which step would you take next? And I was reading them all, I thought, they all sound like really useful things to do for change management. And then when I reread the question, it said, which is the next step you will take? And then I read it again. I thought, if that's the case, this is the next thing I would do. The first thing I would do, and then the other one. So yes, you have to. They all sound like good answers sometimes. So it's really important that you read the question and make sure that you're actually answering what the question's actually asking you. And I think, like we said before, I think you've got time to be able to do that with this version of the exam, the amount of time that you've got.
So all the questions that we had, is there enough time? Yes. Do all the questions link to the Learner Study Pack? The answer there was yes as well.
Yep.
Does the 30-minute break work? Yes. How difficult is the exam? Luckily less difficult than the previous version. More achievable, more realistic time frames given. Main thing, the reason why this exam is more achievable is you have time to take it. But still a difficult exam, still an exam that takes practice, study, still an exam that needs to be respected.
Yeah, and I also think the different type questions as well, because there's 4 different type of questions that you've got in the exam. So again, just comparing it to the old exam, there was one type question that you would do continuously throughout the exam. And now there's different type questions. There's multiple choice, there's short answer, long answer, and there's 4 different types. So, that is, again, it makes it for a good exam experience because you're actually not just doing one thing, that you're kind of changing it up again, which I think is a really good thing for the exam. Cognitively, I think it's a much easier exam, but not necessarily in terms of the content, like you said before.
Talking about the content, I just wanted to kind of give a little bit of advice on how to use the book, how to use the Learner Study Pack that you get. Because there's 3 different elements to it. And one of the questions we get a lot from our students is, well, where should I concentrate in this Learner Study Pack? The 3 elements, we have the content. So that is the actual learning materials. That's where you learn about things such as what's a product breakdown structure versus a work breakdown structure versus a cost breakdown structure. So project management good practice is in the content sections. There's practice questions and answers in there, which are of course been written by APM. So the questions have been written by APM, but also the answers have been written by APM as well. And then there's a scenario in there as well for a made-up company called Snappy Appy. And these are the 3 elements of the book. From my perspective, it would be beneficial to memorize the key processes, the steps involved with them, such as change control, having a log, an initial evaluation, a detailed evaluation, a recommendation step, and then updating plans. Memorizing those things is useful because it is fertile territory to write a multiple choice question. So a lot of the multiple choice questions could come from some of those steps. So it is worth putting in the time and effort to actually memorize those steps. It's not, memorizing those steps isn't going to guarantee you pass the exam, but it will help you build a score if you know them and you can answer those confidently and correctly on the exam. Now at Provek, we do have some memorization techniques for the different phases of the different processes such as change control, benefits management, requirements management, etc.
Can you remember the requirements management one, Geoff? It's the one I use, and it's the funniest one. Can you remember?
Go for it, Mark. I'm going to throw that right back to you. I think we'd call that a rhetorical question.
Throw it right back. So the rhyme that we use to remember the requirements management process, which is gather, analyse, justify and baseline, they're the steps you go through, is girls adore Justin Bieber. I wouldn't know Justin Bieber if I bumped into him in the street, but apparently they do. But that little rhyme can just help you remember the steps. Girls adore Justin Bieber, gather, analyse, justify and baseline. And these little tips like that will help you just, under those exam conditions, just help you remember those steps. And then if you've learnt it, because it, like Geoff said, it is a practitioner exam, then you can explain the application of those steps around that question scenario.
Yeah, and we have one of those for every single process that they have, and there are many of them. So we've got plenty of those up our sleeves to help you memorize them. That's the only one about Justin Bieber, by the way. So
yeah, there is no more.
You probably picked the funniest one there. Yeah. Secondly is, I would know why we do the things that we do as project managers. The key documents that we create, we spend a lot of time and effort on, like the project management plan, business case, comms plan, not just what they are, what's in their table of contents. They want a test taker to have a full understanding of why we do the things we do as project managers, what benefits they bring. So I have a little script in my head going into the exam. If I were giving advice, I would say, have a script about 5 things that are good about a project management plan, 5 things that are good about a business case, 5 things that are good about a comms plan. Because of a common element in the syllabus, it's a theme that reoccurs again and again, is why is the comms plan beneficial? Why is a project management plan beneficial? Having a script in your head ready to go for those kind of questions is going to pay dividends on the actual exam.
Yeah, it is a practitioner's exam, as we've said before, and they want to test your knowledge. So certainly it's the recollection of that knowledge as well. Those processes help, but it's also how they are actually used within a project environment. And I do think that's where the snappy app scenario comes in really well, because you're not just kind of learning and recalling the information that's in the course and the study guide, but you're also practicing questions that will help you apply that knowledge as well, so you can understand in what scenario it would be used.
Second part we'll take a look at is in the Learner Study Pack. There's questions, sample questions, and sample answers. This might be the most valuable element because they're coming directly from APM. So these are APM created questions, APM created answers. They'll get you used to the different types of questions. One of the learning curves that you go through when you take this exam, when you start on your journey to becoming PMQ certified, is what are all the different question types? You've got simple multiple choice questions. You have complex multiple choice questions where there's more than one right answer. Those are always a little bit tricky.
They're the tricky ones. Yeah, they're the tricky ones.
And you've got short answer questions and you have long answer questions. And all of those are represented in the book. You'll get an example of what each of those are, as well as sample answers. Now, these sample questions in the book do come with a bit of a warning label, though. They are easier than the ones on the actual exam. There is a jump in the level of difficulty between the questions in the book and the questions on the actual exam. Both Mark and I can attest to that from taking the exam. So you're going to need to do studying to kind of get you up to that next level. But they are still extremely valuable, even though they're a bit easier than the ones on the exam. They show you the format, they show you how APM thinks, that shows you how the scenarios will be set up. So I would key in on those elements of the book very specifically. And the third one, and we've mentioned this, that you'll see in the book, is the snappy appy scenario. It is very, very complex. It asks a lot of very probing questions. And it is a very, very involved scenario, and it runs all the way through the book. But what we advise is that you read it. It's not something to memorize, like the Justin Bieber steps.
Yeah.
It isn't something that you want to have a script available ready for it. But reading that scenario can give you some insights into how APM thinks, what they value, what they believe you should be doing in certain scenarios that come up commonly in project management methodology. So the Snappy Appy is a good scenario to take a look at to get sort of an overview of APM's philosophy, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, to add to that as well, I think that's the whole kind of purpose, I think, of the study guide, isn't it? If you use that study guide, then you do get into the mind of the APM, the kind of questions they're going to ask you, how you apply it, and then that should prepare you really, really well for the exam, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a really good support guide.
Final thoughts?
Final thoughts. I think I generally think. I'm not a massive fan of taking exams. I know there's only about 2 crazy people I know who love taking exams. But as an exam to take,
I'm not one of those people.
No, he's not one of those. I won't disclose names. But I do think, that with regards to taking an exam, it's one of the better formats that I've actually taken.
I agree.
I think, even the amount of time, with a break in the middle, I think just makes it really accessible. And, the different type questions just makes it, a good exam, I think, as good as exams can be. What do you think, Geoff?
Yeah, I think from APM, mission accomplished. They wanted to make the exam more accessible. They wanted to make it more fair. Less onerous to take, and all of those things have been accomplished. Parts of them through the timing mechanism, parts of the way they've calibrated the questions. You now have enough time to take the exam, and the break really works. So all of those are strong yeses. So I took all of that away, just in summary. In addition to that, I would, if I was taking this journey for the first time, I would get myself ready for scenario questions. I would study those questions quite hard, and if I was giving further advice, I would say read them very carefully. They do give you very, very good hints as to what is the best of the 4 choices for multiple choice. It's often somewhere in that scenario. So get used to reading things critically and picking those things up would be a key point. But outside of that, it's very, very good news all the way along. We're happy to sit here and report that we've taken the exam, and we're very impressed. We think they've made the right steps at APM. They've got an excellent qualification test to build off of into the future. So we wish you all the best if you're on your journey, and please feel free to get in touch with Provek. We'd be happy to assist you on that journey. We're over at www.provek.co.uk. My name's Geoff Filbey. You can find me. I'd be happy to chat with you. And Mark, I think you're staying.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, more than happy to chat about project management always. And hopefully we'll see you on a course in the near future.
Thanks very much for your time.